Check. Whoop. Check. Levels. All right. Let's do it. Okay, and our first request comes in for Dionysian 66 with his piece Madness Stalks the Forest of Your Mind in poetry and free verse. Off the beaten path, no street lights, nature has embraced you. Solitude has been found. Suddenly, feeling as if you are not alone, the darkness becomes palpable. Shadows embody subtle movements, heart rate increases, breath quickens. You begin walking faster, trying not to panic. It feels like something is following you. Now what? Dread sets in, anxiety starts. Your eyes say you're not alone, yet your mind says otherwise. Footsteps echo in the growing silence of the night as phantoms dance in and out of sight. Each one becomes more terrifying than the last. The mania of the mind begins to manifest in your vision, shaping fantasies, promoting nightmares. Your mind is fatally infected with the delusion of paranoia. Now you begin to question your sanity. It feels like the entire forest is watching you. Are those really tortured souls in the trees? Yeah, that's a good piece. Dionysian 66. Thank you. All right, and then down the spotlight page, the next one requested is by KlausDreadful. Cool name, by the way. And it's called A Beautiful Chaos. She was a goddamn miracle wrapped in a mess, a chaotic symphony of contradictions that left me breathless. Her hair was a tangled, wild thing, like she'd just come from a fight with the wind. And her eyes, Christ, those eyes, could strip you bare with a glance. She laughed like the world was ending, and she didn't give a damn. We met in a dive bar, the kind of place that smelled like old cigarettes and spilled beer. She was sitting at the counter, nursing a drink that looked as bitter as my past. I slid onto the stool next to her, more out of habit than intent. She glanced over, raised an eyebrow, and I was hooked. "Buy me a drink or just sit there looking pathetic," she said, her voice a smoky rasp that curled around my brain and squeezed. I bought her a drink and another, and before I knew it, we were talking about everything and nothing. She told me about her dreams, about the art she wanted to create but never did, about the teachers who dismissed her dreams and the lovers who couldn't handle her intensity. I told her about the stories I wrote and never finished, about the words that never seemed enough. We were two broken pieces trying to fit together in the madness. Her apartment was a disaster, a testament to her beautiful chaos. Paintings half finished, books piled in precarious towers, clothes strewn like she'd been in a hurry her whole life. But there was something in the mess, a kind of wild beauty that called to the parts of me I thought were dead. She'd lie next to me, tracing the scars on my chest with a finger, whispering secrets and dreams. And I, the cynic, the bastard who thought love was for fools, found myself believing that maybe, just maybe, we could make something out of the broken shards of our lives. One night, as we lay tangled in each other's arms, she looked at me with those piercing eyes and said, "Do you think we'll ever make it?" I kissed her forehead and whispered, "We already are." She was a whirlwind, a goddamn force of nature, and loving her was like standing in the eye of a storm. It wasn't safe, it wasn't sane, but it was real, and in the end, that's all I ever wanted. You know, it's funny because reading that, these are Cole's reads, by the way, but I kind of felt like I was watching, almost like Mickey Spillane meets, Barfly meets, just the cool way this story was told. I could almost imagine like a cool like detective reading this, or like a voiceover in a movie, a black and white, like something noir. This is really well done. And I like what he did here. I like exactly what he did here. He pulled it off. KlausDreadful. Thank you for that. I'm going to deep dive this profile. This feller. Okay. I thought I saved these in order of, but I didn't. I just have to find them all now. There are two more. And this one's called Mumbles of a Dissociated Self by Edensthoughts. Okay. Ears that have grown weary, they start to ring. It's all so loud, so incredibly loud. Why won't the voices cease? Why do they grow louder? Why do they grow in number? They leave me rattled. They leave me in pieces. If only you could be here to pick up the shards. I like that. I like that a lot. Okay, and after my sip of crack, the last piece requested is it's from our romance and erotica portal. That whole genre is something that I don't read a lot. I don't get requested a lot anyway. And it's by one of my favorite authors on the site, Mariah. Every time Mariah is requested, I constantly I like reading Mariah cold or hot. This is a really nice story, I can tell right now, but I'm going to read this cold because I like to kind of discover lines with everybody else. For the challenge videos, I typically read them first and I read them on the channel, but this is from Bunny. Cool. It's a challenge that says from summer heat to cool retreat. Right about a time that you were enjoying the sweltering heat of the summer, and then all of a sudden it switched to rain or wind or whatever, and you had to find another place to hang your hat. Where did you go, and did you make any discoveries along the way? Did you find a friend? Did you find a lover? If none of this happened to you, will you imagine a story about it? Ain't nature a strange and poetic beast? Right how changes like these can be instantaneous and sometimes uproot our expectations and routines. Best observations and most revealing wins the crisp $1 bill. I want to hear about sex, self-actualization, transformation, and a whole enchilada. Have fun. That's a cool challenge, Bunny. Yeah, so Mariah with Joule's Anomaly. I like the energy of that title. Pun intended. This should be good. Juliana hurried. What had been a beautiful summer day hiking the Appalachian Trail was quickly turning into a weather event. She had been completing portions of the trail as her schedule allowed, but lately her progress had been hit and miss. The approaching thunder had an ominous, low rumble that seemed to resonate within her. Her hike was about to be scrapped. Again. Juliana finally located a trailer shelter and quickly entered. A strong gust ripped the door from her grasp and flung it all the way open. She swore and pushed it shut behind her, relieved to have reached some semblance of safety from the coming storm. Looks like you made it just in time, a deep male voice spoke. Juliana turned around and squinted as her vision adjusted to the dim interior of the shelter. A man sat on the floor with his back propped against his pack. He was writing in a small leather journal. As she shrugged off her own pack, the stranger put his journal aside and rose to his feet. He approached her and offered an outstretched hand. Arlo. The timbre of his voice had the same effect on her as the approaching thunder. It somehow was felt more than heard. She ignored that odd feeling and accepted his hand. Juliana. Zings of electricity instantly flowed between them as they touched. It felt like a strong static shock, but instead of hurting, it felt good. Juliana quickly pulled her hand away and stepped back. Whoa, that was weird, right? She laughed nervously and rubbed one hand against the other. Small branches were thrown into the shelter's metal roof with a noisy clatter. Arlo glanced upward and shook his head. Not weird at all. These conditions are ideal for energy exchange. Energy stored must be energy released at some point. He looked at her and continued. Within the atmosphere and perhaps between humans too. He trailed off thoughtfully, slowly rubbing his hands together as well. Breaking eye contact, he ran a hand through his hair and gave a self-conscious laugh as he blushed. He has great hair. I wish I could run my hand through it, Juliana mused. It was now her turn to blush. The uncharacteristic, intrusive thought caught Juliana off guard. Really? You've known him, what, a full 2 minutes? She admonished herself until she felt appropriately guilty. Juliana, Arlo began to ask her something when the other thought suddenly occurred to him. Your name. Yeah, but no one calls me that. Everyone has always called me Jules, Arlo interjected. Yeah. How did you know that it would be Jules and not Julie? She could not hide her surprise. I don't know. Just a guess. It really does suit you, though. Arlo rubbed his chin with an amused and oddly pleased look on his face. Jules was confused by his reaction, but didn't ask. Wanting to change the subject, yet hopeful to continue their conversation, Jules queried, So, what do you do for a living? She immediately cursed herself inwardly for going with such a generic question. Arlo watched her kaleidoscope of facial expressions and laughed good-naturedly. It's okay. I study atmospherics thermodynamics. Okay, I can't even pretend to know what that is, Jules laughed. But can I guess what it has to do with? Of course, Arlo nodded, adjusting his glasses. Meteorology? As in weather prediction type stuff? Jules playfully ventured. Not exactly. It's a branch of physics that studies the relationship between heat and energy, and other things too. But I'm most fascinated with the transfer of energy that occurs in nature. So today happens to be my favorite kind of day. Almost on cue, thunder crackled and boomed, rattling the windows. Arlo grinned and continued. You see, I track energy anomalies, and there have been several strong but sporadic readings in this area. I feel like I may have isolated a pattern, but it is too early to tell. I am here on vacation to hike, but also to do research if the opportunity presents itself. They sat on the floor facing one another. Arlo leaned against his pack and Jules against hers. Despite their awkward start, they both now felt at ease. Without further prompting, Arlo began to explain thermodynamic theory to Jules. He was quite animated while describing his life's work. Despite the fact Jules found Arlo to be highly intelligent and incredibly articulate, she understood very little of what he was telling her. However, what caught and held her attention was the manner in which Arlo spoke. Jules had never heard anything technical be expressed so eloquently and passionately. To her ear, his words sounded like scientific poetry, if such a thing existed. She felt like she could listen to him speak for hours. She felt a hum growing between them as he spoke. It felt like a warm magnet, sensuously fluctuating and pulling at her center, pulling her toward him in a most intimate manner. Am I losing my mind, or is he feeling this too? It was at this point that Jules became mesmerized by Arlo's mouth. She became entranced by the way his lips moved. She couldn't help but stare. She eventually felt strangely jealous of each spoken word, each uttered syllable. If only she could be caressed by his tongue and lips like that. Vivid images of his handsome face buried in her lap while both her hands grasped his hair came to her mind like a lightning strike. She blushed and looked away, but the image remained. Okay, this is crazy. Stop, you perv. But Jules did not stop. This time she welcomed the intrusive thoughts and embraced the resultant heat that flooded her body. Her mouth watered, her heart raced, and her breath rate increased. Her nipples hardened, and eventually the throbbing slickness between her thighs became impossible to ignore. She adjusted how she was sitting, but the unavoidable rubbing only made the ache worse. The last few synapses in her brain that were not lust-infused attempted to reason with her. Perhaps there is a scientific explanation. Is it somehow related to the storm Would Arlo know? I mean, he is a scientist, after all. But what if this can't be explained? And then suddenly, Jules didn't care anymore what the reason might be. She leaned toward him, the pull now too strong to resist. Outside, the storm intensified. Its insistence to be known was now in tandem with her need. Arlo had stopped talking and looked deeply into her eyes. What she saw mirrored her own desire and fascination. It was obvious to Jules that he was indeed feeling the powerful attraction too. He was as smitten as she, and his arousal was as achingly present as hers. He could not hide it if he tried, and he had no intention of doing such a thing. Heavy sheets of rain lashed at the window as they slowly leaned toward each other. As lips parted and tongues met, the most spectacular sensation surged through them both. It was stronger and much more sensual than the zing from their earlier handshake. Whatever few reservations they were still holding on to were now completely abandoned. They impatiently fumbled with and tore at one another's clothes with desperate hunger. They broke from kissing only when absolutely required. Everywhere their bare skin touched, erotic electricity snapped and sizzled. Tendrils of supernatural longing raced and spiraled between and within them like currents. Their senses moved together as if they were celestial dance partners following ancient choreography. Only the two of them were ever destined to know. Arlo's eager hands cradled Jules' bare cheeks and lifted her onto the countertop in one fluid movement. Her arms and legs reached to greedily encircle him as he moved toward her with animal intensity. The storm that ensued between the two rivaled the raw beauty of the summer storm raging around them. The power that had been unleashed that day changed the landscape of all they thought they knew. As they continued to explore the principles of thermodynamics together, Arlo was confident he had at last located the source of the anomaly. They learned everything that energy release between two humans was meant to be, in theory and in practice. I think I need a cigarette. And there are lots of comments, and there should be. This was beautifully written. And so, thank you for that, Mariah. That was what a good way to jumpstart my day. And that's going to wrap today. Thank you for being here, and thank you to the talent featured on the show today. And before I go, I'll say it again. If you like to read or write, go to thepros.com, read and write, inspire, be inspired. In case you haven't noticed, the world's kind of fucked up right now, and we could sure use your work. Give us something real or just beautiful. Either one of those or both. Also, before I go, the new challenge on Prose, the $500 cumulative challenge, the write the first chapter of your biography challenge. I want to say that the last two videos dedicated to that, we're going to keep featuring new pieces as they come along. But I want to say that once you get to like $500, once you get up there, the challenge pool, it just keeps growing. And then you can, who knows how many people will enter and how much money is available for the winner. It's based on likes, like the description says, and there's one vote each. So it's a really fair and pretty cool challenge. And I'm hoping it blows up and some writer out there makes a shit ton of money off it. Wouldn't that be awesome? Just to have that, right? But anyway, that's not why we do it, but what a fucking great bonus that would be. So I'm gonna get out of here. Thank you for being here, and I will see you in the new video. And as always, take good care.